Alan Watts has probably spent more time in my ears than some of my friends. I've listened to him while driving, while walking, while working, while falling asleep. And I can't say I agree with absolutely everything Alan Watts has ever said, but there are so many ideas that have completely changed the way that I look at life. Not because they gave me all the answers, but because they changed the questions. And near the end, I'll explain how I try and carry these things into my everyday life. Because philosophy is interesting, but only if it survives contact with reality. So, let's discuss Alan Watts. Part 1. Are you playing the game? One of Alan Watts' recurring themes was that life is less like a journey and more like a game. Not a game in the sense that it isn't real, a game in the sense that the point isn't simply to finish it, the point is to play it. And I feel like Watts drew a lot of this from the Hindu philosophy and the idea of Leela, divine play. The notion that existence itself is not some grim march towards the final destination, but a form of cosmic creativity, like an artist painting, a musician improvising, or a dancer just dancing. The dance isn't trying to get somewhere. The song isn't rushing to the final note. The painting isn't desperately trying to become finished. The act itself is the point. And when I first heard that, it sounded beautiful. And then it sounded terrifying. Because if life isn't about arriving somewhere, then what exactly are we doing? So many of us spend years believing life begins later. After we get the job or the promotion, or when we get the certain type of relationship, or our mortgage is paid off. Always after the next milestone. But Watts ever so gently and elegantly asks, what if you're already in the thing? What if this is it? Not the waiting room or the rehearsal. We're not warming up. The performance is right now. Part 2, the people who try the hardest. One thing I always loved about Alan Watts was his sense of humour. I mean, he didn't seem interested in becoming another serious spiritual authority. I mean, he seemed deeply suspicious of people who desperately wanted to become spiritual authorities. He loved pointing out the absurdity of the human condition, especially when it came to enlightenment. The harder people tried to force awakening, the further away it always seemed. Trying to become enlightened can become another project of the ego, a spiritual version of trying to become rich, or famous, or important, do you know what I mean? And Alan loved poking fun at that. It's like, try to relax harder. Try fall asleep harder. Try to be spontaneous. Like, I just feel like he was always... One of my favourite stories that sort of encapsulates that spirit was something like, how long should I meditate for? The teacher goes, you should probably meditate for an hour. And he goes, what if I don't think I can sit for an hour? And the teacher says, well then maybe you should sit for 4. And it's funny because it's painfully accurate. Because the people who claim they have no time to sit quietly are often the people who need it the most. Oh, and I include myself in that. Part 3. The stories. Watts understood something that many philosophers forget. People rarely remember points or arguments. They remember stories. And some of his favourite stories were the Zen stories, like little puzzles disguised as conversations. One of my favourite stories is the story of the young woman who gets carried across a muddy road. 2 monks are travelling together and they encountered a young woman and she couldn't quite get over the muddy section of the path. And one monk picked her up and carried her across. And then they continued walking. And then hours went by And the other monk exploded at him, saying, "We're monks, we're not supposed to touch women. How could you carry her?" And the first monk, looking so perplexed, just says, "I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" Oh, isn't that just what we do? Someone says something hurtful and we just carry it. Something embarrassing happens and we carry it. A relationship ends and we carry it. Years later, we're still carrying something life put down a long time ago. Oh, and another one of my favourites was the one about the young woman in the kimono, and she's given with tongs a piece of hot coal from the top of the shisha, and not having any way of taking the coal, she wraps a kimono around her hands. She takes the coal from the gentleman and she scurries away. She changes her kimono and she comes on back, and a little while later she takes the tongs, she takes a hot coal, and she presents it to the man that gave her the coal. And with nothing to collect the coal, he wraps his hands in his kimono and he burns a hole in it. And the gentleman's just there looking at the woman saying, she gets it too. It's a game. I love the way that he used all of these little stories to remind us it's a game. Because in that situation, most people would be furious, attached to the object, the burning kimono. But she just calmly returns the gift. The lesson's not that things don't matter. It's that reality happens. The kimono's now changed. And the thing is, suffering often begins when reality changes and our expectations refuse to. Part 4. You did not come into this world. My favourite Alan Watts quote is simple. You did not come into this world, you came out of it. I genuinely think that sentence altered the way that I see reality, because most of us imagine ourselves as visitors, dropped into existence, separate from nature, separate from the universe, separate from everything. But Watts argues something radically different. You are the nature. You are what the universe is doing. Oh, one of my favourite ways he put it was that the earth is peopling. And I just thought that was so cool. The way that a tree sprouts fruit. He says the same way that, I can't remember what he said exactly, but it was something like the same way that a apple tree apples, the earth peoples. And I just thought that was so cool. You are what the universe is doing in exactly the same way that a wave is what the ocean is doing. The wave is not separate from the ocean. The leaf is not separate from the tree. The branch isn't separate from a forest. And we're not separate from reality. We're just one of its expressions. And I actually love this quote so much that I referenced it in my book, because it aligns with something I've come to believe, and that's that everything will always be collectively coding our reality. Every action, every thought that somebody has, every conversation, every kindness, every cruelty, we aren't standing outside reality observing it. We're participating in its creation every single day. Part 5, Wu Wei and the Eternal Tao. I mean, this naturally leads into Wu Wei, probably the most misunderstood idea in philosophy. People hear effortless action and assume it means work less, or do nothing, or be passive. But I don't think that's what it means. Wu Wei is more like being aligned. Like the river's not forcing itself downstream. The tree isn't actively thinking to grow upwards. Nature participates in nature. It doesn't struggle against nature. And Alan Watts spent much of his life pointing out that perhaps we are nature too. Maybe the reason we feel exhausted isn't because life's difficult. I mean, maybe sometimes it is. But maybe sometimes it's because we're swimming upstream. The Tao, the eternal flow of reality, it keeps moving, whether we fight it or not. The question becomes, can we learn to move with it? Not perfectly, not permanently, just a little more often. Part 6, how I try and live this. I said at the start I would try and explain how I try and take this forward in my own life. Now here's where philosophy either matters or it doesn't, because if these ideas stay in books, they're just decorations. For me, Alan Watts is less about collecting wisdom and more about remembering perspective. He reminds me not to, as he would say, hang up. Not to get so caught up in the game that I forget I'm playing it. I still have responsibilities like bills, work, projects, dreams, deadlines, stress, anxiety, moments where I forget everything we've discussed in this video. But underneath it all, I try to remember something. This is an experience, a participation. It's a dance. And within that dance, I've just chosen a mission, and that's to make impact beautiful. Not perfect, not finished, beautiful. Because if life really is a game, then that's the game I've chosen to play. If you've made it this far, I'd genuinely love to know. What's your favourite Alan Watts quote? Story, theory, moment? Leave it in the comments. And if you want more videos exploring Alan Watts' philosophy, meaning, consciousness, the ideas that shape we see reality, consider subscribing. And until next time, try not to forget you're part of the game. Oh, and join the mission. We're trying to make impact beautiful.